Have you ever read a passage of scripture that seems quiet on the surface, but when you dig in, it just completely rewires how you see everything? Well, that's Romans chapter 4. It's one of those explosive passages that doesn't just teach an idea, it actually reshapes our whole reality in the light of Jesus Christ.
And it gets right to the heart of the most fundamental question we could ever ask, a question that echoes through all of human history. How can any of us, flawed as we are, possibly stand before a perfect, holy God and be declared right?
So to find the answer, the Apostle Paul doesn't start with a philosophical argument. Nope. He takes us right into the middle of a conflict in a real church in ancient Rome, where this very question was tearing them apart.
So picture this. In the church at Rome, you've got Jewish believers, and for them, the law of Moses was everything. It was their heritage, their identity, their badge of belonging to God. And then you've got all these new Gentile believers, non-Jews, who are looking around and thinking, wait a minute, do we really belong here? Are we second-class citizens in God's family? The whole church was wrestling with who they were and what it meant to inherit God's promises.
And Paul's answer to this mess was just revolutionary. He basically tells them, you're all asking the wrong question. He draws this sharp, clear line in the sand. On one side, you have the law. That's about regulations, limits, effort. It's all about what we do. But on the other side, that's the promise. And that's about inheritance, covenant, faith. It's all about what God declares. He's saying our inheritance in God's family isn't for the rule keepers. It's for the promise believers.
And who is his star witness for this radical claim? A man we all think we know, Abraham. But Paul wants us to see him not as some stained glass saint, but as a real man, staring down a situation that was completely, utterly impossible.
I mean, just stop and really think about this. God gives him this incredible promise. You will be the father of many nations. But every single piece of physical evidence, everything he could see and touch, was screaming that God's promise was a fantasy.
Talk about a contradiction. Paul uses really blunt language here. He says Abraham considered his own body, which was, and I quote, as good as dead. Then he looked at Sarah's womb, also dead. The promise of having a son wasn't just unlikely, it was biologically absurd. By any human standard, it was a joke, and yet he believed.
Now this is so important, because this is where Paul redefines faith for us. The faith that made Abraham right with God, it wasn't just optimism. It wasn't positive thinking or having a can-do attitude. It wasn't just trying to look on the bright side of a hopeless situation.
No, it was something so much more raw, so much more real than that. It was the faith of absolute helplessness. It's the picture of a man with no other options, clinging with everything he has to the only thing left, a word, a promise from God.
And that is the faith that justifies. That's what makes us right with God. It's resting all of our weight on God's faithfulness, especially when every circumstance around us is screaming the exact opposite of what he has promised.
But here's the twist. Abraham's faith wasn't powerful because it was so strong. The power wasn't in his faith. The power was in the one his faith was pointed at. The question isn't how strongly Abraham believed, but in whom he believed.
And this is the God he believed in. Romans chapter 4, verse 17 describes him this way: the God who gives life to the dead and calls into existence the things that do not exist. This is the God of new creation. Abraham's faith wasn't a blind leap. It made perfect sense because it was anchored in the very character of the God who made the promise.
And listen to that language. It's not past tense. Paul says God gives life to the dead. He calls things into existence. This is who God is continually. This is his ongoing work. This isn't just a one-time thing he did at the beginning of the universe. This is resurrection logic, and it's been hardwired into God's story from the very start. And now, right here, the whole argument pivots. Paul takes this ancient story about Abraham and, like a movie director, he swings the camera around to show how that very same promise finally took on flesh and blood. This is the hinge of the whole chapter. In Romans chapter 4, verses 23 and 24, he says, "Now it was not written for his sake alone that it was credited to him, but for us also." Did you catch that? This ancient story wasn't just for the history books. It was written for us. The spotlight suddenly shifts from the deserts of the ancient world and points right at you and me.
So why was it written for us? Because that promise of life from death that Abraham clung to, it didn't stay an abstract idea. It found its ultimate, perfect fulfillment in a person. Jesus Christ is the living, breathing embodiment of God's promise.
You see the beautiful pattern, right? The logic is exactly the same. but the focus is crystal clear. Step 1, Abraham was counted as righteous because he trusted the God who could bring life from a dead womb. Step 2, we are counted as righteous because we trust that very same God, who flexed that very same power by bringing Jesus to life from a dead tomb.
And this brings us to the breathtaking climax of the entire chapter, what Christ's resurrection actually means for our standing before God right here, right now.
Just let the perfect balance of this verse wash over you. It's Romans chapter 4, verse 25. He was delivered over for our trespasses. That's the payment, the cross dealing with our sin, and was raised for our justification. That's the proof, the receipt that our right standing is secured. His death settled our past. His resurrection guarantees our future.
You see, the resurrection of Jesus isn't just a neat trick to prove there's life after death. It is God's public verdict. It is the divine gavel slamming down, declaring to the entire cosmos that the debt of sin has been paid in full and our rightness with Him has been established forever.
So what does that mean for you today? It means your standing with God has nothing to do with how you feel or how well you performed this week. Your right standing is as secure as the historical fact of Christ's empty tomb. It's as certain as God's unbreakable promise. It is as unshakable as God's own faithfulness.
And that brings us right back to the beginning. Faith isn't some heroic effort we make to try and climb our way up to God. No, faith is simply the open, empty hand that receives a righteousness, a perfect right standing that has already been accomplished for us by Jesus and proven by His resurrection. So let's end with this. This isn't just theology to be debated. This is truth to be lived. If your acceptance before a holy God is as secure, as final, and as real as the resurrected Christ Himself, how does that change the very ground you walk on today?